Okay. Looks like it's 7 o'clock, so we can get started. Some folks will still be coming in. Good evening, everyone. I'm Stacy Harris from the Port Chester Rybrook Public Library. First, with special thanks to White Plains Library for letting us use their Zoom account. On behalf of 18 local public libraries, the Port Chester Historical Society, and the Westchester County Historical Society, I'd like to thank you all for being here tonight. Our speakers are from the Lenape Center, based in Manhattan, with the mission of continuing Lenape homeland through community, culture, and the arts. I'd like to introduce Curtis Zuniga, co-founder and co-director of the Lenape Center, and Joe Baker, executive director of the Lenape Center. Curtis, if you'd like to start.
All right, thank you. Well, greetings, everyone, and thank you for allowing us with the Lenape Center, the privilege of joining this group tonight. And we hope that it is informative, and we hope that you will learn a lot more about Lenape Center. You're probably already familiar with the history of the Lenape and your area of Westchester County, and along the Hudson River. We represent the original people, the Lenape of that area. We're the descendants of those indigenous people. Now, I greet you today from Oklahoma, where I am an enrolled member of the Delaware tribe of Indians, and the Delaware are the modern day descendants of those indigenous Lenape people. And I am an enrolled member out in Oklahoma, where we've been since 1867. And then I'm also a co-director for Lenape Center. And we are a nonprofit arts organization. My colleague and our executive director, Joe Baker, will speak a little bit more about that here momentarily. But I wanted to come to this conversation with the notion that we're here to represent the Lenape people. We're the voice of those ancestors. We speak of the spirit of those ancestors. We speak of the spirit of the waters and the land and all that was which the area that was called Lenape Hoking. So I wanted to open it up with an introduction of myself, but I do want to turn it over to Joe Baker and allow him to introduce himself before we get on with our lecture material. Joe.
Good evening, everyone. Great to be joining you, Curtis. Always a pleasure to see you during our pandemic world of Zoom. I'm an enrolled member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians, and I'm actually speaking to you tonight from Connecticut, Middle Haddam, Connecticut. I'm on the eastern bank of the Connecticut River. It was only a month or so ago that I really learned that this was a Lenape village. It was a village site. So I'm very, very moved and honored to be, after many, many years, very close to the homeland, to that ancestral land of our people, the Lenape. And I'm excited to share with you many of our programs that we've been involved in and future developing programs that we're bringing online. So with that, I'll cut out and back to Curtis, and then I'll come back on later. But it's a pleasure to be with you more later.
All right, thank you. And then also we have another co-director and colleague of ours, Adrian Cummins, who is from Cold Spring, kind of over in the area where our audience is. And he also plays an integral role in the success of Lenape Center. But he also said, I'm going to leave my still picture up and you guys do the talking. So we just wanted to let you know that 3 out of 4 of our board members are here on this presentation. We do have another, Brent Michael Davids, who is a member of Stockbridge Muncie band of Mohican Indians. Their reservation is out in Wisconsin. So again, it's a privilege to join you all. So as I talked about the Lenape and Lenape Hoking, here we go. Bear with me, folks. I'm going to try to bring in a slide. All right. I got to ask, can you all see my slide there of Lenape Hoking, the map?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, good. If you'll take a look at this, the shaded area is what is called Lenape Hoking, or Land of the Lenape. You'll notice that it includes New York, Manhattan, of course, but all of New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, in the direction of, but not completely to, the Susquehanna River, but and then all the way down into the Delaware Bay and even the northern part of the state of Delaware. But going back up north, up the river, it goes all the way up to about the foothills of the Catskill Mountains. And at that point, you start getting up into Six Nations country, the Iroquois people. And so as we look at this map, you'll get an idea of this was our original homeland. Our creation legend has us as a people. The land itself, we're a people of the land. We're the original people of the land. We came from the earth, and that earth came from beneath the great water. And the great water held a turtle that rose from the depths of the water to the surface of the water. And after encountering sunlight and bringing some of the earth at the bottom of the water upon its back, a great tree of life sprung. And from that tree of life sprung the humankind, the man and the woman. And it is our cultural and spiritual beliefs that the spirit power of man and woman are equal, but they are also in balance. They are definitely separate as far as identity, but they are complete when they are joined together. So in our society, women were not subservient. Women were equal. And I think that's a very important distinction. It goes all the way back to the creation story about how man and woman both came from the tree of life, from the back of that turtle that eventually grew to become Turtle Island, our Indian world. Lenape Hoking. Lenape is the name for who we are. It means simply the original people of the land. And the Lenape were historically known as one of the oldest nations of people, very well known for their diplomacy, their oratory, and their deep religious sense, religious practice. They were called upon to be peacemakers and settling disputes between warring factions. So this is the persona of the Lenape people that was carried over the centuries long before the Europeans came. By the way, I'm noticing our audience, there is a feature there for you to raise your hand and ask questions. I'm going to ask if you would write those questions down in the chat, and I believe our hosts are going to kind of help moderate that and get those questions in front of us. But if you would allow me, I'm going to continue. We'll get to some of those questions after a while, but I'm going to continue with my presentation here. The Lenape people also, now don't get me wrong, when I talked about us being peacemakers, orators, and elders, the grandfather tribe, as they were called, we were also capable of being fierce warriors and had been involved in wars between different tribes. We had at times conflicts with the Iroquois people and the Susquehanna people. However, we're more well known for being the peacemakers. Now, then came the Europeans, and this goes back to the late 16th century. A lot of history will talk about the sloop, the Half Moon, and Henry Hudson coming down the river and encountering the Lenape people. And then over a period of time, more of the Dutch came. Now the Dutch came as part of a East India trading company, and later evolved into West India trading company, and the fur trade became a principal economic foundation of their purpose to come there. The Dutch, soon many explorers, colonizers came. They brought the military. They brought the faith keepers, the priests, the missionaries. They brought the politicians, the governors, and the like. Each time they came with the attitude of this was a land ripe for the taking, and that these indigenous natives were nothing but merciless savages. Now, that was the prevailing attitude coming into our land. And you can understand why it was so difficult to go beyond just simple trade and barter of goods in order to survive. The part that confused everybody was buying land. That was a concept that the Lenape didn't have. And it started with the Dutch and the very infamous the purchase of Manhattan. We've all read about it in the school books when we were in, 8th grade. And even I looked at it at a superficial level when I was in 8th grade, and I thought, this just doesn't sound right. And after detailed research, the Lenape folks did not understand the concept of ownership of land. The land was a gift from the Creator, and we, the Lenape people, were part of a balanced occupancy on the land of the two-legged, the four-legged, those that were swimming in the water, those in the sky, those beneath the ground. Even the water had a spirit. The mountains all had a spirit, and we had ways that were given to us, cultural ways, ceremonial ways, religious ways, that when we practiced those ways and we used our language, the Lenape language, and put a word on everything, we gave it a depth of meaning that created a way of life. Now, as I speak of language, and you look at this slide once again, because of the large geographical area, the language had different dialects that were regionally influenced. And so over a period of time, linguists have put names on it. The Southern Unami and Northern Unami dialects, although all were spoken throughout Lenapehoking, that dialect of the language, which meant words were a little bit different for this or that. You might think of it as speaking the English language, but somebody from Bangor, Maine is going to say it completely different than somebody from Lafayette, Louisiana, or West Texas. So with that in mind and talking about dialects, these were known as the Unami and the Munsee dialects. And these names are important as the people and the language moved further west, and there were more factions and splinter groups that were forced to leave the area when they took with them their culture, they took with them their language. And that's why even today, the Munsee dialect as spoken by some of the Lenape up in Canada, they have different words, but there are some profound similarities. It's an Algonquin-based language. And again, the Lenape were the grandfathers. They were the most ancient and most revered of the Algonquin people. Now, after I'll tell you real quick a story about purchase of Manhattan that, again, we did not understand the concept of purchasing land. I'm going to stop my share here and go back. And therefore, an exchange of goods for the right of occupancy was the intention of the Lenape, because it was in their nature. Maybe they understood the Dutch and the Quakers and their goodwill and their brotherhood. They understand some of those egalitarian concepts, but the Dutch soldiers and the Dutch governor was not interested so much in being egalitarian. They wanted land. And therefore, this idea of the purchase of Manhattan with whatever, beads and baubles and axe heads and the like, that was merely trading goods for the right of occupancy. But when they didn't understand that, the Dutch ran them off. They claimed they bought the land, ran the Lenape off, built their fort, built the Palisades, built a giant wall around New Amsterdam. And by the way, folks, inside that wall, the road that went around that wall, the perimeter of that wall for transportation, people, horses, wagons, and the like, that road over a period of time, over the centuries, became a street. Yes, folks, that's where the name Wall Street comes from. It was the street along the wall that the Dutch built and later the British fortified when it became New York. Wall Street was the street along the wall that kept the Lenape out of the land that they merely thought they were allowing the Dutch to occupy. So this goes to the concept of language and meaning and customs and traditions of two completely different people coming together and trying to peacefully coexist. It did not work. And in time, the Lenape encountered many, many different types of conflict with the Dutch. For instance, there were massacres at Pavonia over by New Jersey. The Keef's War. This is in the period of 1643 to 1657. Again, the Lenape, seeking peaceful coexistence, could not find it from a people who were hungry for land and acquiring land by ownership or conquest, and to rid the land of the merciless savages. So that conflict of cultures is to the detriment of the Lenape simply because they didn't have enough people to counter the swarms and swarms, continually swarms of Europeans that came. In 1664, the British began to take over. They ran the Dutch off. They had several wars. And indeed, even I'll simply going on. I'll just say that the British started taking over, and that's when New Amsterdam became New York, and also a English colonial governor, Sir Thomas West, over that river valley that extended throughout Lenape-Hoking all the way down into the Philadelphia area. All of that river valley, a colonial governor. He was originally from Virginia, but he took over. He was Sir Thomas West. One of his titles of nobility, he was the third Lord de la Warre, Warre. And de la Warre eventually morphed into Delaware. And that's what the British began to call those native inhabitants. They called them the Delaware, just like the land, the river valley, and the like. And that's where that name Delaware came from. That's our colonial name. But in our language, we are Lenape. Now, that's what was going on starting up in the New York area, but also down in Philadelphia in 1682. William Penn, a Quaker, entered into an agreement led by a Lenape chief and a council of chiefs, but led by Tamanin. And the Pennsylvania colony began to arise starting in 1682. However, once again, the Lenape, the Delaware, were cheated out of land based on agreements that were made that were never followed by William Penn's progeny, who were left to run the Pennsylvania colony. So through all of this period of time, with European encounter and taking on European goods and products, but also they were encountering Christian missionaries who came to convert them. It was part of the European charter to convert the savages or get rid of them. But above all, to take over the land, extract the resources, and send them back to the king to make the king rich. And in growing the land, generations of Europeans began to call that their homeland once they got rid of the Lenape. So again, I think it's very important for you to see that and understand that a conflict of cultures, and that goes all the way down to thinking of what is land ownership? How is that conveyed? What kind of agreements were struck? How did you get past the language differences and the meanings and nuances of language? It ended up to the detriment of the Lenape people. Now, that carried on into the 18th century. And it was in the mid 18th century that the Lenape actually began to move toward Western Pennsylvania and Ohio as the British began to take over right after the French and Indian War. So again, it was that time period after the British first came on, and then as their power and prominence grew, the Lenape started moving westward into Western Pennsylvania and Ohio. They suffered, again, more massacres. The infamous massacre of the Conestoga and the Lenape in central Pennsylvania near Lancaster, and then another massacre in Ohio, where roving bands of white murderous criminals that had the protection of the military were conducting raids just to kill and get rid of the Indians. They actually had a scalp bounty the governors of some of these areas paid a bounty on the scalps of Lenape to rid them of the Indians. That's the kind of racism that's a part of our nation's history. It's not one that you and I might have been told when we were in 8th grade history class in junior high. But I'm telling you the reality now, and it is well documented. And that's why part of the effort of the Lenape Center is to bring these cold, hard truths to the surface, but learn from the past and to find ways of bringing the Lenape back to their homeland and giving them a rightful place at the seat of power back in the homeland, to make things right for what was done wrong against the Lenape all those years ago. Again, it was not clean and pretty for the Lenape people. Even after the United States came into being in 1776, they were at war with the British. There were a lot of the Delaware and their warriors who were being influenced to go west and north with the Shawnee, the Miami, the Wyandots, and so many other kindred tribes to go and align with the British and to keep the Americans from taking over their lands. However, a small group of Delaware leaders, principally Kilbuck and White Eye, was engaging in fierce disputes with their own people. Captain Pipe, Hoboken wanted the Delawares to go with the British. Kilbuck and White Eye said, no, we're still living amongst these Americans, and we should support the Americans. George Washington coveted a relationship with the Delaware, and he at least wanted neutrality. However, the Treaty of Fort Pitt on September the 17th, 1778, which these Lenape leaders, Kilbuck and White Eye, signed, they ended up agreeing to side with the Americans. The Revolutionary War was won, and the treaty that was struck on that day, September 17, 1778, the treaty that was struck promised the establishment of a 14th state, equal representation in the Congress, and that the head of that state would be the Lenape. It's in the treaty, it's in the history books. But once the war was won, shortly thereafter, Congress had no appetite whatsoever for ratifying agreements, and they just let it lie fallow without any follow-up, and any efforts at Indian nationhood and representation in the Congress was rebuffed. And remember that the early Congress and the president were in New York after 1776. That was the beginning of the United States government. Now, during that movement then, westward into Ohio, and I saw a picture that says, where are the Lenape today? So please allow me, if you would, for just a moment while I go to and share screen. All right. I should have a map up there, a map of our removal. I hate that word removal, but so if you'll take a look at this, I'm watching the clock here too. But again, there was a question, well, if the Lenape were moved out of their homeland, where did they go? you've got to realize a time of where the Lenape were all together. They were strong, they were powerful economically, they were powerful as a nation, and yet with these different factions coming in the context of a war, a series of wars that were going on, these villages and these groups of people ended up fleeing or being forced out of their original homeland. Now, if you'll take it, there's a lot of arrows going on there, but there were some who headed north up through the Iroquois country and past Niagara Falls and into Canada. There were some that went westward through Pennsylvania and Ohio. I spoke about that. But once in Ohio, at the site of a Moravian mission village, the Moravians were a Christian sect from Eastern Europe, kind of in the Romania, Czechoslovakia kind of area. There is where they originated from. But their missionaries were very prominent throughout, particularly Pennsylvania and Ohio. And it was a infamous massacre of the peaceful Christian Delawares at Gnadenhutten in Ohio that forced them to flee out of there. And by the way, those that committed the atrocities against the Lenape, they were the Americans, American Army, and the Paxton Boys, that murderous gang of racists that were bent on just killing Indians. So those Moravian Delawares were forced out of that Ohio area, went and crossed the river into Canada out at Detroit. And there are today 2 reserves that have been there since the 1790s. Delaware First Nation at Moraviantown, which is about 100 miles east of Detroit, and Muncie Delaware Nation just a little bit further. There's also a small community called Six Nations that have Lenape descendants as a part of that community also. However, the larger band, as you continue to look at this map in eastern Ohio, the larger band of remaining Lenape continued to sign treaties agreeing to give up the land that they were living on and to move further west. And it wasn't just the Delawares. It was the Shawnee, the Miami, the Wyandot, the Ottawa. There were so many other tribes that oftentimes came to a treaty encampment together and spent 2 weeks and finally agreeing and signing treaties to move away, and the promise of another piece of land further west where they could live peacefully. At that point, we were run out of Ohio. The main band, the most numerous of the Lenape people, moved on to a reservation in Indiana along the White River. And a smaller part split off and started heading toward the Mississippi River. And indeed, at the end of the 18th century, at a place south of what's now St. Louis, Missouri, near Cape Girardeau, you had a group that split off and went down south through Louisiana into Texas, and they even went as far as Old Mexico. Now, the main band continued on out of Cape Girardeau. They went across southern Missouri. Then they didn't like that area. It was too rocky. They needed more agriculture. Yes, they were strong in their agricultural skills. Then they went into an area in Kansas along the corridor, which now say Leavenworth to Lawrence, Kansas. And I say we because I'm an enrolled member of Delaware Tribe. We are still the main band, the main group of Delawares that were on this diaspora. And we had a reservation between 1830 and 1866 in Kansas. We were farmers. We were very adept at agriculture. We were peace-loving people, but during the Civil War, we actually sided with the Union to keep Quantrill's Raiders out of Lawrence, Kansas. So, you know, again, we could be peaceful, but we had mighty warriors and also great scouts to help the Western explorers. But after the Civil War, we had to move out of Kansas because the railroad companies wanted our lands, and they forced our last treaty on July 4th of 1866, and we were told we had to relocate down into the Indian Territory. And in 1866, it was indeed still a United States territory known as the Indian Territory. Now, if you look at those, the very bottom arrow, you've got that small band that split off, went down into Texas and Old Mexico through the early part of the 19th century, and then ultimately came back up into the Indian Territory. And a few years after our band came down into northeastern Indian Territory inside the Cherokee Nation, the other band, which were called the Absentee Delawares, ended up settling among the Wichita Nacado in western Oklahoma, now known as Anadarko, Oklahoma. So here's this diaspora where we're spread out all over the place, forced to move by a more powerful European-based culture of people that now call themselves Americans and fancied themselves as the native people of the land. To this day, the Delaware tribe in northeastern Oklahoma, in the inside the Cherokee Nation, and the Western Delawares who relocated and renamed themselves Delaware Nation. And then I remind you, back up in Ontario, Canada, there were two bands of Delawares at Moraviantown and Muncie. Excuse me. And then finally, there is a small band of Muncies that joined with the Stockbridge Mohicans, and they were given a reservation in Wisconsin, thanks to the friendship of the Menominee Indian people, and they established a reservation, and they are to this day in Bowler, Wisconsin. So I just now put up another slide. I hope you can see it. It's called Federally Recognized Delaware Muncie Tribal Governments. Did I bring that up?
I still see the last slide.
Okay. Screen share, pause. New share. And this and this. So I simply want to go on record as saying that there are 5 federally recognized Delaware, also Muncie, tribal governments in North America right now. And again, I'm an enrolled member of Delaware Tribe, but I come to you today representing Lenape Center. If you want to get the official word from the federally recognized tribal governments, here's the information on where you can contact them and inquire of them about their take on history and their own particular story. They've got very compelling stories, but here is the ultimate story, folks. It's a story of endurance. It's a story of combating erasure, combating genocide. Yes, genocide, outright genocide. It's hard to believe that people could do that. We hear about it, we see it in other places in the world. But it actually has been going on. And one of the worst weapons of genocide was that the Lenape people could not, did not have immunities to many diseases, viruses that were brought to this land. So we have a long experience with pandemics, viruses, and diseases killing our people. And even though we have a lot of hesitation and mistrust, we're survivors, and we continue to survive to this day. That's why I mentioned these 5 communities here. And if you want to learn more about them, I encourage you to contact them and let them speak for their tribal governments and their tribal communities. And they will tell you also a story of endurance, survivance, and now we continue to grow and thrive. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, my elder, my good friend, Joe Baker, to talk about how Lenape Center came about through all of this time, and who we are today and what the Lenape Center is doing about this incredible story and making it a 21st century story of survivance. And Joe Baker.
Thank you, Curtis. And wow, it's a complex history. It's a big story of forced removal and continuance. And just to give you an idea about my family arrived in Indian Territory in 1867 from that Federal Reserve in Kansas. And in fact, my great-great-grandfather, Simon White Turkey, is one of those warriors that Curtis Zuniga spoke of, who was successful in turning back Quantrell and the Raiders, their attack on Lawrence. So I came into this world in 1946, and there were a lot of things I would hear growing up in Oklahoma. First thing I remember hearing, I was a war baby. Wasn't quite sure what that meant. Would become more evident to me later as I grew up. The second thing I remember hearing, I was Delaware, Lenape. And that would become, over time, more and more important to me. Here's a true confession. My mother's Delaware and my father was white. And I really found my Indian family more exciting. I loved to go to the dances and the social occasions. And it was there that I heard the native language, our language spoken. It was there later in my development that I heard of ancestral land, Lenapehoking, this land that we occupy today in New York. And it seemed forever impossible for me to get there. It seemed so far away, so far east, that I could only imagine and dream of what life must have been for our ancestors. Through the teachings of tribal elder Nora Thompson Dean, I was inspired to know more about our homeland. She, on her return trips to Lenapehoking, would return to Oklahoma and share stories about feeling the ancestors here in the homeland. And that stirred in me a curiosity to know more about what this original homeland might be. So fast forward over time, I eventually arrived in New York, primarily through my interest in the arts. And I began to explore more and more about the area. In 2010, along with co-director Adrian Cummins, we're standing on the Upper East Side. And I say to Adrian, the Lenape have been forgotten. We never hear of Lenape in New York today. And that was very true. You could hear reference to our people from scholars and the academic community, but it was not in the everyday conversation and in the consciousness of the people who populate the great city of New York. Even if you go to the National Museum of the American Indian, which is right down there, near Wall Street, on the footprint of the Dutch West India Company, there is not an exhibit that really tells our complex story, the story of the Lenape. 28 years in existence, National Museum of the American Indian has never presented an exhibition about our people. So these things were in my mind at that time. And it was at that moment that we decided that we had to change the reality of the present day, and knowing that Lenape people are forward thinking, it would be time to establish a nonprofit organization whose mission was committed to the return and continuance of Lenape Hoking through community, culture, and the arts. And we would start Lenape Center. That was our beginning. We were joined by Curtis Zuniga, co-director, and later Brett Michael Davids from Stockbridge, Muncie. One of our first projects was purchase of Manhattan, a concert opera, which was performed in the church, the sanctuary of the Collegiate Church, the Marble Collegiate Church, which was the original church of the Dutch West India Company. It was a retelling of the story of the purchase, the mythical purchase of New York by this tremendous composer, native composer. It was a very powerful, well-reviewed in New York Times, critically acclaimed, and it was one of our premier and first expressions of what Lenape Center would continue to be. We have organized and held 5 different symposia, bringing together tribal leadership from the diaspora. I can't get the word right. The communities or tribal communities in the western part of the U.S. And those symposiums have been at the Brooklyn Museum, NYU, and Abrams Art Center. We have currently a very exciting project and collaboration going with Seed Shed. It's a seed rematriation project in Hurley, New York, along the Hudson River, where we are reintroducing ancestral Lenape corn and beans. And that project is moving into its 2nd year. We were consultants for the play Manhattan by playwright Mary Catherine Nagel at Yale Repertory Theater. That was performed 1 year ago in New Haven. We worked with an amazing artist, Melissa McGill, for a public art project entitled Constellation. You may have seen it. It was on Benjamin's Island on the Hudson River. It was these amazing light poles that follow the contour of the castle, which was on the island. And Opie Tamakan was the inspiration for that thought, which is in Lenape, the white way, the white road between this world and the spirit world. Just recently, the new terminal, if you arrive in New York City at LaGuardia Airport, the new terminal, you're going to be greeted in our language, both dialects, Muncie and Unami, by an amazing installation by the artist Laura Owens. We're working now in partnership with Madison Square Park Conservancy for a soundscape, which is going to be our language, with the artist Maya Lin. In addition to that, there are numerous lectures, Columbia University and other schools, a great number of school presentations for elementary and middle schools. Adrian Kumans and I are teaching. We just concluded this mini-mester course on Lenape Lifeways at Columbia University through the School of Social Work. And every week we're doing multiple workshops, living land acknowledgement workshops for various organizations throughout the city of New York and area and joining areas. We've worked with the Metropolitan Museum of Art and their land acknowledgement. And just recently, we were so pleased to be a part of the inaugural blessing of Tammany Hall, working in partnership with BKSK Architects, Union Square in New York, for that amazing refurbished historic building, which has this amazing turtle, glass turtle dome that is situated on the rooftop of Tammany Hall. And if you're in the city, you must see it. It's very, very powerful. So that gives you sort of a landscape of the activities that we're working on. We continue to explore every day new possibilities, new collaborations, new opportunities. We like to think of ourselves as being almost guerrilla in our approach to activities. We're flexible, we're nimble. We keep moving forward, always driven by this vision that we will be able to bring our communities, our people home to Lenapehoking so that they can enjoy the rich assets of a great creative center, which is New York City. And so with that, we invite all of you to think in terms of reaching out to us, joining us in this effort, in this important return of our presence in the Newark area. We think the time is right for this. We're at the right place at the right time, and we welcome the opportunity to work with you. And I'm looking at the clock, and if we're going to take any questions, we might get to that now. What do you think, Curtis? We've got about 10 minutes. Well, actually 5 minutes.
Stacy, let's see, what time did we start? We started an hour ago, right? Are we going an
Right.
hour and a half, or are we, I think Joe and I's time, we're going to be an hour. Is that correct?
I don't believe we ever defined the ending point for sure. You can go till whatever time you like. I'm not in any rush to take off, but if you'd like to start answering some questions, I did take note of some of them for you.
Let's do
And I
questions.
noticed Curtis has also answered some of them in chat.
I am trying to answer some of them. And one of the most important ones, very good, from Donnie Radford. Where are you located? What is your contact information? I'll write it in the chat, but Lenape Center is based in Manhattan, New York. However, right now we're, Joe, I believe we're talking with the Union Square people, Tammany Hall there. Would you explain once again our contribution to the incredible architecture? And that's kind of something we'd like to have, office space there. But Joe, before you say that, let me just ask everyone to write this down. I'll put it in chat too. But we have a Facebook page, Lenape Center, and we also have a web page. So that's where we can be found. But Joe, would you mind speaking once again to this recent incredible work we did at Tammany Hall over at Union Square in New York?
Well, that project developed over a period of about 8 years in conversation with BKSK Architecture, who actually won the commission to refurbish this historic landmark building in Union Square, New York. Tammany Hall was a notorious political, or Tammany, became a center of political dissidence. It had a very difficult and rough history, but it was named after Chief Tammany, who is a much revered and important Lenape leader historically. So it seemed like a really wonderful fit that we could work with this creative firm and beginning to reimagine what kind of space that might be commemorative of the Lenape story. So the creation story, which Curtis shared with you early about the turtle and the rising water, that became the idea, if you will, behind this glass dome that would rest atop this historic structure. So, it's a very beautiful space. It's a very creative, adaptive reuse of an important historic building. And in my view, it really speaks to what a monument could be today, rather than a frozen statue of some individual. It could be much more expressive of a much broader and bigger idea of creativity and creation, which I think is, what Tammany Hall represents today. Seed Shed, I can speak to Seed Shed. So, there's a growing movement, which is very exciting today among individuals who and tribal communities who are into seed saving and making available to their communities historic seed crops. And that's exactly what our partnership with Seed Shed is all about. The corn that we're growing, this is the interesting story, traveled through generations from the homeland here in New York, through generations of the family of Nora Dean to Oklahoma. The seeds were saved, kept by Nora Dean, and they returned to the homeland last year, 2020. So we're talking about hundreds of years, the journey of the seeds with the people, with the families, now returning to the homeland to be grown in native soil. And as we build this seed bank, we'll be able to redistribute those seeds to our communities in the diaspora.
I regret that I don't have Nancy Dickinson. I don't have a slide worked up, but I pulled this right out of a magazine, and you can see Tammany Hall here. Yeah. And there's a glass dome on top of that building. And the architectural design of that dome is in the shape of a turtle, which is, again, one of our clan symbols. Turtle, takoch, or in the clan, it would be Pukwango. That's Turtle Clan, but the turtle itself, the animal, is takoch. But let me see. I'm sorry I don't have a slide worked up. I'm just trying to respond real quick to Nancy's But you can see once again, there's the building, and you can see a dome out of glass. I know Adrian and Joe went up in there on the top floor. It's from what I could tell from the photographs, just an amazing sight. Of course, since Lenape Center had a collaborative relationship with the architects, we sure are hoping that we can end up with a spot there to work from as Lenape Center. But we claim all of Lenapehoking as our where the Lenape Center is. It's we operate virtually many times, and because I'm in Oklahoma, Joe is in Connecticut, Adrian is upriver at Cold Spring, Brent is out in Wisconsin. We learned, especially during the pandemic, how to use Zoom and how to stay in touch with each other through the internet. So one of these days, we'll invite everybody over to our office space in New York so that we can actually have a live lecture. But everywhere I go, when I go back to Lenapehoking, I feel like I have returned to the homeland. We refer to the homeland as Mother Earth. In other words, we give it that kindred, make it a kindred spirit, our mother. And because the Lenape were pushed away from our homeland, whenever I come back to Lenapehoking, whenever I come back to New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, I feel like an orphan who has been reunited with a long lost parent. And it's that familial relationship through the spirit as to why the Lenape spirit is still alive, that we connect with that when we come back. Joe has felt it, I've felt it, and we will continue to find ways to be welcome back and take our place at the table of all of the other institutions of power and the many groups of people that now call New York home. And we are part of that experience, not just in the past, but today also. Okay, we've got somebody talking about, I think somebody's having a little trouble on the website at the moment. There may be some work being done, but I don't have all the details on that, but just keep that website address handy. And after tonight, check back on it. And you can see our Lenape Center at Gmail address also. Please write that down. Keep that handy.
I'm just going to repost the Lenape Center email address because it went only to the panelists. So let me just set that to go to everyone. And I will cut and paste that. Okay.
I was hitting the wrong button when I was sending stuff out. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it just, it defaults to only the panelists unless you change it to, you got to do the pull down menu and make it all panelists.
Okay.
Attendees. In some cases, it went to specific people that you responded to plus panelists.
Folks, over my shoulder, this way, you'll see the logo for Lenape Center, a sassafras leaf. Joe, you were the inspiration behind that. Can you tell our audience about the sassafras leaf and why it's important to the Lenape?
The sassafras, is well beyond the fact that it's purely a beautiful shape, and it's also an unusual tree in that it has two different generations of shapes. The three, the leaf you see now, and then the other leaf is the shape of a mitt, but it's used in medicine. It's indigenous to this area. And in fact, it traveled, is the eastern forest goes all the way to that very edge of Oklahoma, which is where we ended up in our movement. So the sassafras was with us continuously to Oklahoma, along with the eastern red cedar, which is used for purification among our people. So it has great significance, and it is a medicine for our people.
I noticed a comment or question about, can you speak about how members of the general public could help out Lenape Center? Again, it is following us, being aware of the many public programs that we provide. And it's a lot easier now thanks to Zoom. But the success of the Lenape Center will help combat the erasure. And when we say erasure, it's like the Lenape were long forgotten after they were run out of New York and Philadelphia some 250 years ago. They were forgotten because the historians put them in the past. Until recently, Indians were in the museums along with the woolly mammoth. You know, it's like we were in the Museum of Natural History with the dinosaurs. We are still alive. And Lenape Center seeks to combat the erasure, which was part of overcoming white guilt for killing and removing the Lenape people from their homeland. If it wasn't in the history books, all of that, then it's like, well, I guess it never really occurred, but it did. But we want to be, again, sitting at the seat of power back in the homeland. And when I say that, I mean economic power, political power, cultural power. We're in arts and humanities and a cultural organization. We still have an incredible artistic representation among our people. Great artists, writers that talk about this experience in a contemporary manner. And the Lenape Center seeks to be a host for these people to come back to the homeland and to be able to have their artwork, their books, their oratory in front of the audiences back in the homeland. We just want to be welcome back and feel like we're welcome in our homeland, and we can sit at the table with everyone else and tell our story and how compelling our story is to the foundation and the roots of those towns that you all live in there, including great big old New York City. We have roots there.
Well, and
go ahead.
I think to add to that, Curtis, one of the most compelling reasons for people to rethink and reconsider Lenape presence in this great city of New York is that this is a story that has never really been told. It's the story of ground zero, if you will, of the genocide. This is the story of the first contact, the first assault on the eastern shores of this continent. It's a story of survivance, resistance, and endurance. And it's a story that can illuminate the future course of humanity, that we would hope that the city of New York would embrace this opportunity, that the cultural organizations within the city would, for the first time, open their doors to the richness of Lenape art and culture. We have, and certainly before the pandemic, there are millions of foreign tourists who arrive at these airports in the city of New York. And we have many occasions, many contacts by foreign visitors asking us, where do we go to learn about the first people, the original people of New York. And there isn't a place. And if you travel, if you think about, if you arrive in Vancouver, you arrive at the airport, you really know you're presented with this incredible art of the original people. You know where you are. That has to happen here. And we're committed to exploring ways that can become a new reality. So we ask for your help in doing that. Just join us. It's a great journey. And it's been a great pleasure being with you tonight. So thank you for this time.
I'm seeing a lot of questions that require follow-up. I mean, we could have another Zoom call just trying to answer all of these questions. I would ask you to perhaps write them up and send them to us at the Lenape Center and give us a little more time to spend following up and answering your questions, pointing you in the right direction. You know, I've got questions about good books and good resources about the Lenape. I'll tell you what I'll do is, I don't know if I can post these two maps I showed you tonight, but we'll certainly do that on our Lenape Center webpage and our Facebook page and make those where they can be accessed. Those are public, those are pretty much public domain type of maps. So
Curtis, if you'd
yes,
like, I could gather up the questions that have been posted to date, and I could maybe send them to Stacy so you guys could answer them if you'd like, and maybe we could share them with people afterwards if you're interested.
very
Okay,
good.
very good.
We'll do it that way. Sure.
All right. Okay.
Okay, well, to Curtis and Joe, I'd like to say Wanishi. Thank you for your donating your valuable time, and we greatly appreciate your being here with us tonight.
Thank you so much. Wanishi.
Yes, that word Wanishi is the Lenape word for thank you. We're very grateful for the opportunity to reach out to you all and such a widespread group too. I do look forward to where we can follow up in person after the pandemic and get a much more richness of depth and texture in our conversation and share more images. I'd love to bring one of our social dances back there. And one of the ways we all get together and share the spirit is to dance and to sing some of those old social dance songs like the bean dance and the turkey dance and other dances using rattles and small water drums. You know, to be able to do that, that's how we get together and share the spirit. And we do all of that to honor the ancestors. It was the same ancestors who resided on the lands where you all are now. Those ancestors, they left an indelible spirit, even though they were physically forced to move out. And we, the descendants, many of whom had never been born in New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania, that we still have something inside us that makes us feel like we're a part of the land when we come back. That's the things that Joe and I have been talking about. And we want to feel welcome back. So if you want to help out the Lenape Center, look for opportunities where we and our followers, our people, our friends, our relatives can come back and be a part of your community. Make it a collective community. We have a lot to offer and to bring back, and we look forward to doing that. So again, please feel free to contact us, but I'll, Stacy, I'll make sure that I send these maps and a couple of other attachments over, and you can share them with everyone on this distribution. I do, again, thank you, as Joe said, on behalf of Lenape Center, Wanishi, and I wish you all a lovely evening. And again, it's been my great pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.